Imagine, it's 1870. The British Empire is the undisputed king of the world. They control a quarter of the entire planet's population. Their navy dominates every single ocean, and their factories produce more goods than any other nation on Earth. Britain is responsible for 1 out of every 4 items traded globally. They're not just powerful, they're unstoppable. Or so everyone thought. But across the Atlantic Ocean, something extraordinary is brewing. The United States is still nursing its wounds from a brutal civil war that ended just 5 years earlier. The country is torn, divided, and trying to rebuild. Most people in Europe are watching America with pity, not fear. They think it'll take generations for this young nation to recover, if it ever does. They couldn't have been more wrong. Here's what nobody saw coming. In just 46 years, America would completely overtake not just Britain, but the entire British Empire economically. We're talking about beating an empire that stretched across India, Canada, Australia, massive parts of Africa, and dozens of other territories. An empire so vast that the sun literally never set on it. And America, this recovering, reuniting nation, would surpass all of it combined. This is one of the most dramatic economic power shifts in human history, and it didn't happen by accident. It started with 3 critical decisions that American leaders made during the Civil War, decisions that would reshape the entire global economy. Think about it this way. In 1870, if you wanted to bet on the world's economic future, you'd put your money on Britain without a second thought. By 1916, that bet would have bankrupted you. America had become the new economic superpower, and the world would never be the same. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. Britain wasn't lazy. They weren't stupid. They didn't just sit back and watch it happen. The British were still innovating, still building, still expanding their empire. They were doing everything they thought they should be doing. Yet America still caught up and passed them. How does that happen? How does a country recovering from a devastating civil war overtake the greatest empire the world had ever seen in less than half a century? That's the story we are about to tell you, and it all begins with understanding just how powerful Britain really was in 1870. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss this.
April 1861. The American Civil War begins, and most people think it's going to destroy the United States. Instead, something unexpected happens, becomes the spark that ignites America's economic explosion, but only in the North. Let me explain why. Before the war, America was really 2 different countries, living under one flag. The North had factories, workshops, and a growing industrial economy. The South was almost entirely farmland, relying on enslaved people to grow cotton. The gap between them was enormous. The North produced 17 times more textiles than the South, 30 times more leather goods, and an incredible 32 times more guns. Think about that. For every 100 guns the South made, the North made 3,200. The North also controlled 71% of all railroad tracks in America. The South, just 29%. When 11 Southern states left the Union, something politically powerful happened. The Republican Party, led by President Lincoln, suddenly had complete control of Congress. For years, Southern politicians had blocked their ideas. Now those obstacles were gone. The Republicans immediately passed laws that would transform America's economy forever. First, they raised tariffs, making imported goods more expensive, so American products could compete. Second, they authorized the Transcontinental Railroad with massive government money behind it. Third, they created a single national currency called greenbacks, replacing hundreds of different state banknotes that made trade complicated. Fourth, they passed the Homestead Act, giving settlers free land in the West if they farmed it for 5 years. And fifth, they created agricultural and technical colleges in every state to train the workforce America would need. But here's what really supercharged the Northern economy: the war itself. The Union government spent billions on military supplies. Factories in the North couldn't keep up with demand. They needed uniforms, rifles, ammunition, ships, and more railroad equipment. In Philadelphia, a new factory opened every single week during the war. Meanwhile, in the South, factories were closing at the same rate. The labor shortage in the North drove innovation. With so many men fighting, farmers had to find new ways to work. They bought mechanical reapers that could do the work of several men. In just the war years alone, 230,000 reapers were sold. This pattern repeated across every industry. When you don't have enough workers, you invent better tools. When the war ended in 1865, the South was devastated. Its infrastructure was destroyed, its economy shattered. But the North emerged stronger than ever with modern factories, a unified market, new financial systems, and government policies designed to keep growth going. The foundation was laid. Now came the infrastructure that would connect it all together. May 10th, 1869, a place called Promontory Summit in Utah, a man named Leland. Stanford lifts a silver hammer and drives a golden spike into the ground, connecting the final piece of railroad track. Telegraph wires wrapped around the spike send the news instantly across America. In San Francisco and New York, people fire cannons in celebration. The Transcontinental Railroad is complete, and it's about to change everything. Let me put the scale of this project in perspective. From 1863 to 1869, 21,000 workers laid nearly 1,800 miles of railroad track across some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. These weren't just any workers, they were Irish immigrants, freed slaves, Civil War veterans, Mormon settlers, and thousands of Chinese laborers. They blasted through mountains with explosives, built massive bridges over impossible canyons, and worked through scorching deserts and freezing winters. The Central Pacific Railroad built eastward from California through the Sierra Nevada mountains, some of the hardest construction ever attempted. The Union Pacific built westward from Nebraska across the Great Plains. The government poured unprecedented money into this project. They paid $16,000 for every mile of flat land, $32,000 for plateaus, and $48,000 per mile through mountains. In today's money, that mountain rate would be about $1.4 million per mile. They also gave the railroad companies 180 million acres of land in area the size of Texas. This was America's first massive public-private partnership, and it created the blueprint for how America would build its economy. Before the Transcontinental Railroad, traveling from New York to San Francisco took 6 months by stagecoach and cost $1,000, about $20,000 in today's money. After the railroad, the same trip took 1 week and cost 85% less. Suddenly, America wasn't a collection of separated regions anymore. It was one giant connected market. The economic impact was immediate. Within 10 years, the railroad was moving $50 million worth of goods, coast to coast, every year. Japanese tea arrived in California and went straight to New York. Manufactured goods from eastern factories flowed west. Timber, minerals, and crops from the west flowed east. Towns appeared wherever the railroad stopped. Chicago grew from just 200 people to over 1 million in less than 60 years, simply because it became the hub where all the railroads met. But this was just the beginning. By 1900, America had built 190,000 miles of railroad track, including 5 different routes across the continent. No other industry came close to the railroads in size or impact. They created demand for everything. Millions of tons of steel, locomotives, coal, telegraph lines, and jobs. By 1880, 400,000 men, 2.5% of America's entire workforce, worked for the railroads. This created the framework for the largest single market in human history. Railroads and tariffs tell part of the story, but there's something deeper happening here. It's about productivity getting more output from each worker and each dollar invested. This is where America really pulled ahead of Britain, and the numbers are stunning. In 1870, American industrial workers were already 50% more productive than British workers. By 1913, just before World War I, American workers were twice as productive. How did that happen? 3 massive advantages came together. First, America had natural resources in abundance. Pennsylvania had enormous coal deposits. Michigan and Minnesota had iron ore. Montana had copper. Pennsylvania discovered oil. Then Texas and California found even more. There was timber across the frontier and farmland as far as anyone could see. Britain had to import many of these raw materials. America just had to dig them up. Second, America's population was exploding. In 1870, America had 38 million people. By 1900, it had 76 million. By 1920, 106 million. Much of this growth came from immigration, hundreds of thousands of people arriving every year looking for work and opportunity. In 1882 alone, nearly 800,000 immigrants arrived. These people didn't just provide labor, they created demand for goods. More workers meant more production. More people meant more customers. It was a cycle that fed itself, and Britain simply couldn't match it. Third, America became obsessed with innovation at scale. Yes, Americans invented things: the telephone in 1876, the light bulb in 1879, motion pictures in 1891. But more importantly, America got really good at taking inventions and using them everywhere all at once. American factories pioneered assembly line production, interchangeable parts, and scientific management. Andrew Carnegie didn't invent steelmaking, but his mills in Pittsburgh became the most efficient in the world because he measured and optimized every single step. America also had an education advantage that most people don't realize. By 1870, 390 out of every 1,000 American children were in school. In Prussia, it was 365. In Britain, only 120. The land-grant colleges created during the Civil War were pumping out engineers, agricultural scientists, and business managers. America was building the skilled workforce that modern industry needed. The result was clear. By 1900, the average American was richer than the average British person for the first time in over a century. American factories were producing more steel than Britain and Germany combined. More coal, more oil, more machinery, more of almost everything. America had built a modern, diversified economy faster than Britain could adapt. And the productivity advantage was the secret weapon that made it all possible. So when exactly did America overtake Britain? Here's where it gets interesting, because the answer depends on what you're measuring. If you're looking at GDP per capita, basically, the average wealth of each person in America overtook Britain sometime in the 1890s. It's probably between 1890 and 1896. This was huge. For the first time in over a century, the average American was richer than the average British person. If you're comparing total GDP the size of the entire economy, things get trickier. Some estimates suggest America's economy surpassed Britain's alone in the 1870s or 1880s. But remember, Britain wasn't just Britain. It was an empire controlling territories across the entire globe. The really significant milestone came in 1916. During World War I, that's when American industrial output exceeded the entire British Empire, all of it. Britain, India, Canada, Australia, South Africa, and every other territory combined. America was now producing more than the largest empire in human history. World War I revealed just how powerful America had become. By 1916, American factories were outproducing everyone. The war also showed something else remarkable. By 1943, American output was almost 4 times that of Nazi Germany. This wasn't a one-year fluke. This was sustained economic power that had been building since the 1870s. President Woodrow Wilson was the first American leader to truly understand what this meant. America had become what one historian called a novel kind of superstate, exercising influence over the financial and security concerns of every other major country in the world. But here's a fascinating twist. Even though America had the world's largest economy by 1916, the US dollar didn't become the world's main currency until after World War II. London remained the financial capital. The British pound was still the currency everyone used for international trade. Why? Trust and momentum. Britain had spent decades building confidence in its financial system. The institutions, the legal frameworks, the business relationships, these things take generations to build. Economic size doesn't automatically translate to financial dominance. So why couldn't Britain keep up? Several reasons. Britain industrialized first, which meant it had older factories and older technology that was expensive to replace. Britain's domestic market was small compared to America's continental expanse. British investors increasingly put their money into foreign ventures rather than modernizing factories at home. And perhaps some British entrepreneurs became complacent, comfortable with how things were. But let's be clear, Britain didn't collapse. Its economy kept growing. People's lives kept improving. Britain remained a major power. It's just that America grew faster, bigger, and more efficiently. In 50 years, from 1870 to 1920, America transformed from a war-torn nation into the world's economic superpower. And it happened because of decisions made during America's darkest hours. In just 50 years, from 1870 to 1920, America went from a nation recovering from civil war to the world's undisputed economic superpower. This wasn't luck. This wasn't accident. This was the result of specific choices and circumstances that came together in a perfect storm of economic transformation. Think about what created this miracle. Government policies that unified the market and supported massive infrastructure projects. The Transcontinental Railroad and the network that followed, creating a continental economy unlike anything the world had ever seen. Abundant natural resources that Britain had to import from around the globe. A rapidly growing population fueled by millions of immigrants who provided both labor and demand. Technological innovation that Americans didn't just invent but applied at massive scale across entire industries. Modern corporate management techniques born from running continent-spanning railroads. And an education system that was pumping out engineers and skilled workers faster than any other nation. Today, we're watching similar economic shifts happen in real time. China's economy has approached or possibly surpassed America's, depending on how you measure it. India is rising fast. The patterns look familiar. Massive infrastructure investment, continental scale markets, rapid industrialization, technology adoption at enormous scale, and growing workforces. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it definitely rhymes. And here's something fascinating to consider about Britain. Despite losing its position as the world's economic superpower, Britain today is a far better place to live than it was at the height of its empire. In the 1870s, if you were British, you could expect to live about 40 years. Today, it's over 80. The average income in 1870 was roughly $3,000 in today's money. Now it's 7 times higher. You can experience relative decline and absolute progress at the same time. Your country can lose its top ranking while your people's lives dramatically improve. The same lesson might apply to America. Economic leadership isn't permanent. China may be the next superpower. India might follow. But the innovations, the institutions, the infrastructure that America built during its rise from those critical decisions in the 1870s, onward created prosperity that has lasted for generations. The golden spike driven into the ground in Utah, the free land given to settlers heading west, the greenback currency that unified American commerce. These weren't just Civil War-era policies. They were the foundation of American economic dominance. They transformed a divided, wounded nation into an economic colossus that reshaped the entire world. And it all began in 1870, when a recovering America started an economic revolution that nobody saw coming.